Hey, so before getting right into design, sometimes it's helpful when you're overwhelmed with ideas to think of where you can't design certain things in. And especially when it comes down to it, plants and gardens can look in a lot of different ways, but infrastructure is really permanent and you'll want to plan that in specifically. So some of the big things I think about for design for elimination are utility lines. Overhead utility lines, clearly you don't want trees in there. You do not want to prune for them to be around utility lines. It's just not good for the plant. But you can do shrubs and lower things depending on your utility company, and always check their regulations. If you have utility lines under the ground, then you want to note that. You never want to plant infrastructure over that. I personally like to put paths over my utility lines so that I can remember that they're there, and that also if they ever need to be accessed, it's just a path, right? Some other big things that come up is trees. So right here, we have this what seems like a very small tree. You might not even be able to see it very well because it's the winter time, but this is a pecan. So this is going to be a very big tree. So I'm going to go back to my base map or whatever map layer I'm using to sketch out design for elimination and just show this thing when it's going to be full size, right? Just so that I am future scouting a little bit and know what's going to be happening with the site. Some other things are, of course, if you have really extreme soils or waters, yes, we can do a lot to mitigate those things, but sometimes at the end of the day, it's just easier just to work with whatever soil or water you've got too. Other things is to not block future things that could happen in your site, future infrastructure. The biggest one to think about is if you ever want to have photovoltaic panels on a roof, if you ever want to have gray water system coming off of a bathroom, if you ever want to catch water coming off of a roof. Identify those places even if you don't have the money and resources to do that now, just so that you don't plan for something that's not going to work there later on. And then this is an unusual site, but it's actually not the first site where the main design constraint for having more plants and gardens is that this area is used as a car show for one day a year, but it's a very important event and a very important day for the community. And so there's a lot of places where people park cars, whether they're parking them to show off or parking them just to visit the car show, where I'm not going to plant a garden because it's just not going to work. But I have identified some interesting things, like right here, these barriers, like this is in cement, so that's not really going to work here, but people already don't park on top of that. And so if I can figure out how to do plants and gardens of all sorts of different kinds that are already kind of where people are not parking cars, then it's just going to be most successful because there's not going to be some kind of tension between the car show and future gardens. So look at your site, figure out what your constraints are, and roll with them. So my camera angle on this is not the best, but utility lines overhead, above the ground, under the ground, and how big that tree is going to be, where the cars are going to be parked. I know there's a concrete pad that is not super obvious because it's got some grass on it. I marked all those areas. And then what was super interesting was that besides those barriers where I knew cars wouldn't be parking anyway, I also noticed that next to the fence by the tennis court, people are going to park a car right on a fence. So maybe along that fence might be a good spot.